Okay, now I can tell you about my dream. My insane dream. Perhaps the most insane dream I have ever had. Are you prepared? And I'm reading. I wrote this because I sent it to a couple of people. So I wrote the dream up when I woke up, and I sent it to several people. Because it was that weird, I was like, I need to not be the only person who knows that this happened in my brain. And also, I will note, this was like a super hyper realistic dream. Like, mega realistic dream. And ultra vivid. So, it was basically Evangelion, but not. Nerve HQ was hidden in the basement of a brick theater that was in some kind of city, kind of like Boston, maybe? Something like that. Also, there were no Avas per se, because the angels were not giants. They were just super powerful, supernatural creatures. Instead, the pilots would put on their plug suits, which allowed them to draw energy from the angels and mimic the angels' abilities in order to fight. The pilots could only do this once before the suit needed a recharge, and then they needed medical attention. And so basically, like, instead of getting into an Ava, they get in the plug suit, and then instead of the timer starting when the Ava, comes unplugged, the timer would start when they would, like, activate the plug suit's ability, which would, like, draw the supernatural power of the angel and let them use it, okay? And so now's where it gets insane. With that context, Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was the final angel, but he was a super-powered Dio over heaven, but he had different powers. I don't know if you all know Eyes of Heaven, but in Eyes of Heaven, DIO BRANDO gets all of the corpse parts from part 7, and he becomes basically a god. This Dio could turn into a giant monster type thing, like scary monsters, but huge. He could also grow and he would grow in size. He also could stop time, and was a vampire, and had Zawarudo! This version of Dio shows up at Nerve HQ because deep in the basement, they have some kind of special reactor. It was powered by a MacGuffin that Dio needed to complete his transformation and reset the universe. Shinji, of course, does not want to fight, but Dio tears through a whole squad of people while Shinji is a sad boy crying in the theater on the top floor. Eventually, Shinji goes to fight Dio, but his plug suit is in the locker in the basement of Nerve HQ, so he has to sneak by while Dio is fighting people. So Shinji basically sneaks down that big, like, angled elevator from Evangelion, but, like, he, like, climbs down it, and, like, DIO BRANDO is in there, but he's, like, a big, giant, like, monster with really big, black, like, spiked hands, and he's, like, jumping around killing people in there who are trying to kill him, and Shinji sneaks through this war zone, and, DIO Evangelion, exactly. And Shinji sneaks through this war zone to get down to his locker, where his plug suit is. Shinji barely makes it, but because there's still so much chaos, he does. And then, there was a tension-filled scene where Shinji was hiding in the locker room holding his plug suit, and Dio came in looking for him. It was like the game Outlast. Dio busts in and starts searching parts of the locker room, and Shinji is sneaking around, hiding behind things to avoid Dio as Dio checks the entire room. And he does it successfully. Convinced that there's no one there, Dio leaves to go and absorb the reactor. To do so, and this is a thing from the dream. Very, very specific. Dio needs... Thank you, I will, yes. To absorb this special MacGuffin reactor, Dio needs to transform into something called, in all capital letters, this was like a big part of the dream, it's rendered in all capital letters, called the Sea of Stars, which makes him vulnerable. He turns into a giant pool of liquid that looks like the night sky. When he's in this form, he's vulnerable because if someone goes into the pool, they can fight him inside his own psyche. There are physical forms inside of the pool, and fighting him in there is kind of like the battle inside the beam in Into the Spider-Verse, where there's like stuff flying around. It's just stuff from DIO BRANDO's subconscious, like flying all around while you fight him in like a no gravity like fluid that from the outside looks like a giant pool full of the night sky. And it's called the Sea of Stars in all caps. Because of course it is. That's like the most JoJo shit. So anyway, Shinji, now that Dio has gone, puts on his plug suit and knows what he has to do. He jumps in. They have an epic battle, and eventually, Shinji thinks he's killed Dio. Everybody is like, huzzah! And they go out to have a moment to breathe outside the theater. I will note that, wait, hold on. Okay, yeah, never mind. Okay, yeah, so they battle, and Shinji thinks he kills Dio. Everybody's like, huzzah! And Shinji is outside the theater, and, like, chatting with everybody, who has survived. But then, Dio comes back to life, successfully absorbs the reactor, and starts resetting the universe. Shinji is still in his plug suit, and he is full of determination. He leaps down the angled elevator in one big jump, and lands in the Sea of Stars pool of liquid to have a crazy final battle with Dio. He realizes that with his plug suit, he can channel Dio's new reality warping abilities because he absorbed the reactor, right? Dio absorbed the reactor, so he got new abilities. And so Shinji bear hugs Dio's corporeal form inside the Sea of Stars and creates two massive walls that rush in from the sides and crush them both in order to sacrifice himself and defeat Dio. When he does this, Shinji is half squeezed out the top of the walls so that when the liquid dissipates and people are picking through the rubble, he's found by Asuka. He's barely alive because he kind of like squished out the top of the walls that crushed DIO BRANDO. And so Asuka brings Shinji back up to the top, and they're hanging out outside of this brick theater. Shinji is on a stretcher, getting loaded into the ambulance, and nobody can believe that he activated his plug suit twice, because in this dream world, that should have killed him, right? Then, a giant starry monster, basically like the like actual like skin of the monster looked like the Sea of Stars. The hand bursts out of the walls in the basement, and it's Dio, and he's still alive. And he's like, Ree! And he starts running out of the basement to get Shinji. He doesn't have his universe resetting powers anymore because he used them to resurrect himself, but he wants revenge. So then, and this it gets even fucking crazier, right? So then, as Dio is rushing up that big angled elevator shaft thing from Evangelion, and Shinji is on a stretcher, and everybody's like milling around outside of this like old theater in Boston where Nerve HQ is, Indiana Jones pulls up in an old-timey car, like a 1930s car, and he's like, "Listen, kid, I know this guy. He's an ancient vampire. Give me the plug suit." And so they like strip off Shinji's plug suit and throw it through the window of the car to Indiana Jones, because the plug suit is what Dio is tracking. And so then Indiana Jones drives off. I wrote this all down. So I woke up after having this dream, and I wrote this. I'm reading it. I'm adding a little bit of color commentary, but it was such an insane dream. I wrote it all down as soon as I woke up, and I have pulled up the text document. And so, so then Indiana Jones drives off, And then Dio bursts out from the front of the theater and starts chasing Indy. Indiana Jones gets to his little plane from the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark and jumps in and takes off and is like flying the plane while Dio is chasing him. And then he is shot down in Nepal. At the crash site of his plane, the Nepali Prime Minister is there waiting for him and is like, Indiana Jones, the resurrected Dio will die in 30 days. He is only hunting you because you have this plug suit. And so he takes Indiana Jones to this special, like, pyramid thing, and underneath it, there is this ancient, like, relic that the Nepali Prime Minister is responsible for, and it's like a black tubular maze, like, you know, like the tubes at, like, McDonald's play place that kids crawl through? This ancient relic is like a giant sprawling one of those, but underneath a pyramid in Nepal. But also when you crawl through it, it's like too narrow for you to fit through. And so you go in and it kind of like expands around you and like contracts behind and in front of you. Kind of like when a snake eats something big. Like the tunnel works like that. But otherwise it's like a giant windy McDonald's play place tube. And the reason he puts Indiana Jones in this is because it will take 30 days to crawl through the maze, and it causes psychedelic and transcendental experiences. But it will keep you alive while you're in there. So Indiana Jones can go in this, and the mysticism or whatever energy of this relic will block Dio's ability to track Indiana Jones. So he'll just roam the earth looking for Indiana Jones for 30 days and then die. And so Dio will just wander around and die while Indiana Jones is basically on like a massive acid trip crawling through this McDonald's play place tube. And then I woke up, and that was the end of the dream. It was fucking crazy. It was the weirdest fucking thing I think I have ever dreamed.